Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. Appreciate the opportunity to speak today on the county's roads in the Delta area. So San Joaquin County has about 1,600 plus miles of road and nearly 300 bridges and another 400 minor structures. And just for your edification, a minor structure is essentially a bridge that's less than 20 feet long. Our county is primarily ag, and with all of those features, we've got a pretty substantial transportation network. As far as our bridges, we've got a little over half of them are about 40 to 50 years old, and when they were designed, they had a 50-year design life. So, a quick assessment indicates that we don't have, or that we have a lot of bridges that need maintenance. For our bridge maintenance backlog, we've got about $200 million alone, and just our roads, an additional $230 million or so. So clearly, it's imperative that we need to maintain our roads and bridges. In the Delta area, many of the county roads are farm-to-market roads. The Delta, being primarily agriculture, at least in San Joaquin County, those crops need to get to market. And most of those farm-to-market roads are not through roads. We do have some through roads which kind of serve the commute and recreation traffic too. So as far as the road network in the Delta, your staff was very kind to share this slide with me. And what I want to point out, I guess, focus on in this is the local roads, which are the brown roads. You'll see the orange and yellow, which are mostly state highways. There are a few county roads in those colors too, but the brown roads are the local ones that I want to kind of focus on. And I know it's kind of hard to see it at this level. Hopefully you've seen this map maybe in a staff report or something. But these are the farm-to-market roads that I mentioned, and they're vital for our ag economy. San Joaquin County is, primarily an ag economy. So, and the other thing that's kind of interesting to point out when you look at the map is just how circuitous the roads are. And so consequently there aren't a lot of through roads. They're following levees or on levees, following waterways. So not a real direct route of getting around kind of thing. So. As far as some of the challenges, and I think these were maybe touched on a little bit previously, soil conditions. Relative in the Delta, we've got a lot of organics in the soil out there, including a lot of peat. And I think as maybe the chairman was just kind of talking about Highway 4 undulation, and that's what you get when you have these organic soils. And when you couple that with the water table, the high water table, these organic soils tend to shrink and swell a lot, and so that's why you get a lot of that undulation. Highway 12 is the same kind of deal. And we have it throughout our local roads as well. And with the birds and the fish and the other wildlife in the Delta, not to mention the various resource agencies that have jurisdiction, it's pretty difficult to obtain all the environmental clearances that we need to when we work on our roads and try to maintain them. We've had some projects where the various work windows due to nesting seasons or spawning seasons, and even ag production, crops being harvested, have limited us to just a few weeks a year. So it makes it that much more difficult to do the maintenance that we need to do. I noted traffic volumes or traffic flow. I'm going to stick with volumes because I think that speaks to water too, if you want to follow that along. But while they've been down the last several years due to the economic downturn primarily, long-term projections do show increases over time. So more traffic, more maintenance. And as I noted on our backlogs earlier, we've got a lot of work to do, but we don't have a lot of resources to do it. So it makes it tough as well. It's definitely a huge challenge. And then the last thing I'm just kind of noting is besides traffic, the other thing that always seems to increase is regulation. And more and more, unfortunately, of every transportation dollar is going into the process rather than out onto the construction on the roads. And so and bridges, and that's definitely a challenge. So to kind of summarize, the transportation network, any transportation network is foundational to an economy. And the roads and bridges are the primary components of that network. Without them, goods don't get to market, people don't get to their jobs or wherever else they're going. I want to note that, I don't know how my Caltrans colleagues will hopefully agree, but most every trip essentially starts on a local road and ends on a local road. So local roads are a vital component of the transportation network, and thus the need to maintain them. One of the questions, when your staff contacted me, one of the big questions was, how can the DSC help? And I kind of thought about it for a while, and I guess the first thing that came to mind, when people ask me what I do, a lot of times I tell them I basically fight for money, and so I'm going to assume that you don't have any money to give out, but if you do, I'm all ears. So. So absent that, what I would say is if you've got some, you could provide some assistance maybe into some of the coordination that we need to do in order to get our work done with other, probably more state agencies than federal, but maybe the DSC could provide some assistance in that regard. So, and I guess the last thing I'd like to say is, hopefully, I'm not very familiar with the DSC and kind of its role. I don't think we've ever kind of had any interactions, so to speak, on trying to get our projects through the process. But hopefully, whatever. And I heard kind of earlier about a transition into an implementing agency. So I guess my hope is that you're not going to make it any tougher on us. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Questions for Michael? Yes, Susan, and then Gloria.
On your note about the state's interest in local roads, is there some sort of mechanism whereby the state transportation folks coordinate or work with the locals on the maintenance of the local roads? And I asked the question because of Katrina, they took a really hard look at the levees, and one of the findings was that it was not managed as a system. And so some of the private or what weren't considered state jurisdiction were not as in good shape as the states. So I'm equating that to road maintenance, and it is an entire system. Is there some sort of state, local sharing of responsibility for certain stretches of roads?
Not so much certain stretches. The state does provide bridge inspection on our local roads, bridges on our local roads. That part there is. We will coordinate with them, where a local road intersects a state highway. The state always has jurisdiction at those intersections, so when we're doing work, we typically need to get a permit with them, and that's really not an issue. If there are road closures or detours, things like that, there's coordination between the state and the locals, typically. But beyond that, as far as just the general maintenance of our roads, no, there really isn't much coordination. The one exception, I guess I would say, is if it is a federal aid route, so it'd have to be a pretty higher level classification to be eligible for federal aid. Then we go through the state. Caltrans basically administers the federal aid program for federal highways with local agencies. So if we were looking for federal money, if we were eligible for federal money, we would coordinate with the state.
And that's typical statewide in terms of working with Caltrans, working with the county departments of public works in terms of the delineation of responsibilities. We maintain and operate the state highway system, and those guys maintain the county road system.
Gloria?
Okay, thank you. Michael, I think your issue is really important to what we do as it relates to the levees. You mentioned that your resources are very limited, but I'd like to hear what resources you have. And then, of course, the funding is not something that I'm sure we can do, but you did mention coordinating, and can you elaborate on that specifically, what that role would be from the council, or
Sure.
assistance from the council?
Maybe to answer kind of, I think, your first part there, as far as resources, funding-wise, we're fortunate that we are one of the self-help counties that was mentioned earlier. We have a half-cent sales tax that goes toward transportation needs, and out of that, 35% goes toward local streets and roads maintenance. So we get a portion from our MPO, the San Joaquin Council of Governments, for local streets and roads maintenance. So that's one source. The other source is our state gas tax funds that they're allocated, and then probably the last major source, I guess, that we have is I won't say major, it's a smaller one, but is we had road districts that were pre-Prop 13, so there's a portion of the property tax that's allocated to the road districts for maintenance of roads. So those are the three. The one exception, I guess, would be there's a little bit more money that might come on some roads in the Delta from the federal side if they're federal aid eligible routes. So, but that would be very limited, at least from our local perspective. So most of the roads in the Delta are the state highway system that would be federal aid eligible. And then your second question, as far as coordination. Honestly, I don't know. I know we deal with, I'm not an environmental expert. I know we've got a couple of environmental coordinators on our staff that are, clearing our projects, and so they'll work with Caltrans, on when we work with them. But in some cases on our local roads, we get comments from other agencies. I think the Department of Water Resources, and there's another water-related one that's not coming to my mind. That we typically have to get a permit on, particularly with our bridge projects, even if they're not federal aid involved, that we have to get a permit from. And it is a lengthy process, unfortunately. So I don't know if there's a potential that some facilitation could occur there, but that's kind of what I was referring to.
Okay, great. Judge?
Do you folks ever get together with a view to dealing with the impacts that you have on the Delta? I mean, Sacramento, San Joaquin, Contra Costa, and such. In your role as far as the roads go, you ever sit down with anybody? This is for everybody. I mean, I'm not sure I understand it.
Sure. I can tell you that in the past there has been some coordination between public works directors at that level, between San Joaquin, Alameda, and Contra Costa. So there has been some coordination at our level. Specifically with Caltrans or the MPO, or I'm not sure if
I just think that there is a common thread here. I mean, it's the impact on the Delta itself, whether it's Contra Costa or San Joaquin or Solano or Sacramento or Alameda. I mean, the point I'm making is that is there an effort made at your level? You're in charge of San Joaquin County.
Right.
This gentleman here is in charge of Contra Costa County, and you have COG, area government, Caltrans. Is there an effort, or is there coordination between as your problems arise locally in terms of their effect on the Delta? Do you ever get together?
I can't speak to that to my knowledge that we have. What I can tell you is with the MPOs on a specific project, we will.
But you don't really, as a rule. Go ahead.